If you're ready to unlock more better days, to take control of your health, to push past your limits and unleash your full potential, then you're in the right place. I'm your host, Dr. Jeremy Bettel. For over 2 decades, I've worked with elite athletes and high performers, helping them optimize their bodies, strengthen their minds, and recover from setbacks. Now I'm bringing that expertise to you through the Vitality Collective podcast. In each episode, we'll dive deep into the science, strategies, and real-world solutions you can apply right away. Whether it's enhancing your physical performance, avoiding or recovering from injury, sharpening your mental edge, or simply feeling your best every single day. With insights from top experts and thought leaders, this podcast is designed to help you take action, feel better, and live the life that you deserve. Welcome to the Vitality Collective podcast, where every day is vital. Today, I'm joined by Mike Boyle, a legendary strength and conditioning coach and co-founder of Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning. In this episode, we talk about the recent controversy around 1 repetition maximums, why the 5 to 10 rep range is the safest and most effective approach for most people, and how well-meaning health influencers are often creating confusion by promoting heavy lifting without context. If you're somebody navigating the conflicting advice around how to train for longevity, or wondering how hard you actually need to push in the gym, this conversation's for you. Let's get into it. Today, it is such an honor to welcome one of the people that I grew up following within this industry and have learned so much from over the last 2.5 decades since I started on this journey. Mike Boyle, welcome to the show, and thanks so much for coming on.
No problem. Thank you for having me. I love doing these, so I always enjoy these conversations.
Yeah, this will be a really fun one. And one of the first lessons that you ever taught me, it was back in, I think, 2005. NASM held a conference out in San Diego, and I got to be in one of your breakout sessions. And we went over plyometrics. And this is a lesson that I use to this day. Something to the effect of, your statement was, if you pay to be at a conference like this, and you get to be in a small breakout with an expert like this, and you don't ask a question, you might be an idiot.
That's exactly what I said, actually. That's true. I did say exactly that.
Mike, to this day, if I present at a conference and I'm in another expert's session, I will put my hand up and ask the question.
Me too.
I
sit in those and I have no problem. If I don't understand, I am going to ask, because I look at it from the standpoint of, you're doing me a favor in terms of, I'm not making this clear. If you have a question, I didn't make it clear. So I look at it and think, if I'm a person of reasonable intelligence and I'm not grasping what's being discussed, then I have to look around the room and think other people of reasonable intelligence are also not grasping what this person is saying. But so many of them are afraid, like, oh, I don't want to be the one who puts my hand up and looks stupid. And I'm like, oh, I'll look stupid. I'm fine looking stupid because I want to know. I want you to do a better job explaining it to me, because I'm not grasping it. So yeah, I think, I've said something probably to that effect quite a few times in quite a few conferences.
And this conversation really came out of the recent furore on social media that was caused by your highly controversial statements around the fact that lifting 1 rep maxes might have a slightly higher risk level than not lifting 1 rep maxes.
That's right. And you might need to put like a little sarcasm note here just to make sure that people understand that is not what you think, because there was and we kind of talked about this a little bit off air before we pressed record, but I was shocked at the level of engagement of that post, the level of that there was any controversy at all. I just thought, we talked about this idea. I just want to put up a couple guardrails here. Like, hey, we tend to be between 5 and 10. That's where we kind of like to live in terms of training our adult population. And people went absolutely off the rails. Crazy.
Yeah. Well, and it's a message that we've tried to
have a continuous thread through our shows where we talk about strength training is I think this is all coming out of the recent proliferation in messaging that's being put out, whether it's MDs, researchers, people who don't necessarily train people every day, coming out and saying the research says we need to lift heavy, right, for a whole host of reasons, bone density, muscle mass, muscle strength, and all of that factoring into longevity. And we need to do jump training. But what's missing is what any of that actually means.
Right. And what's missing is how do we get there? It's very simple of saying,
Yes.
I say destination San Diego, and I put my finger in San Diego on the map, but I'm in Boston.
Right.
And then you say, how are you going to get to San Diego? And we can look at this. I always say to people, I actually have a slide on one of my old presentations where I said, you could take a covered wagon, which is what people did. Right. And you could make a case for, hey, covered wagon worked for a lot of people. A lot of people got to the West Coast of the United States via covered wagon.
Right.
Or you could look and say, actually, you could probably take a plane now and it would be significantly better. And I think that's where we run into problems, because you're right. We do the cool thing, actually, and I'm a big fan, like the Hubermans and the Rhonda Patricks and these people. They're doing a tremendous amount of good for the industry.
Right.
Because they've got a big megaphone and they've got a big audience, and they're shouting through that megaphone that, you need to eat more protein. You need to do more strength training. You need to get your VO2 max up. But then it comes back to us as the actual practitioners,
right,
and saying, yes, I 100% agree with that. And let's talk about how we get there, as opposed to, and I said this to you kind of off air a little bit too, it emboldens the power lifter, the Olympic lifter, the starting strength people, those types of people. And you get suddenly these people saying, see, we were right all along. Everybody agrees with us. And it's like, no. That's kind of what they said, but not what they meant in terms of, I have again, in my presentation, I have the grandma deadlift slide. I always show, I said, this is not the goal. Right. Grandma, 1 RMing in the deadlift is really not what we're looking for when we say that people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s should lift heavy. We have to really define. And my thing was, and I spent the whole week defending myself, trying to define, 5 to 10 reps is 87% to 77%, somewhere in that range, depending on whose chart you want to look at and how you want to kind of mix your sets and reps. But I looked at that and said, that's what I would call the safe and effective range. I would look at that and say, if you go under 77, you're probably going to get too light, and it's probably not going to be the strength development that you want. You get up into the 90s, your risk reward starts to tilt more towards risk, which again, simple, common sense, not what I would consider to be controversial at all. But I managed to generate controversy completely unintentionally. People are saying, oh, you're such a troll, and you're on the internet and you're trying to, I did troll a little after the fact because it was so comical, but I initially did not start out that way. I did not start out with any intention that, hey, I'm going to throw some, people are calling it clickbait, rage bait. And I'm just like, I can't believe that you would look at that post and look at that face value and say, oh, that's Mike Boyle, clickbaiting. He's trying to get people to click on his post. I thought that was going to get a couple thousand views, and tomorrow I'd be on to the next thing, never thinking that, hey, I got a week's worth of material out of this. But like I said to you also off air, I did start to play around with the people that were arguing with me. But you know what I love? The thing I love more is the people who start making videos about me, but then don't tag me. And then someone sends me that video. Did you see this video that so-and-so made about you? And I was like, no, I had no idea they made. I can't believe I inspired somebody to make a video talking about what an idiot I was. But I always think that that's good. If I've done that, I guess I probably have accomplished something for the day.
You've done your job for the day on the internet. That was it. It was funny because one of the I put one of those on my story, and my point that I made on that was like, having known and followed Mike Boyle for a long time, if you're critiquing him, I'd kind of like to see your resume.
Mhm.
Because I think when you have tenure actually training people, athletes, general population, that whole mix, you get to see what works and what doesn't very quickly. And you get to see what breaks people and what doesn't very quickly. And the tolerance for risk with elite level athletes is incredibly low. So if we're talking about, maybe it's 2 out of 30 people got hurt in the research, that's fine. Not when you've got a 32-man roster of
Right.
NHL players.
Or not when you've got
Injure
somebody.
2 of them and see how long you've got a job.
Right. But I look at it and think not when it's 2 moms
Yeah.
in your adult fitness group. I look at it and think anything above 0 is a bit of a red flag for me in terms of, I think, again, and people call me, whatever, crazy, scared, conservative, depending on how people want to categorize me. But I think no one should get hurt.
Well,
0.
and I agree with this fact, because if there's risk and there's no other options, okay.
Mhm.
But if there's risk and basically everything else is as effective, like, what are you doing down here in this risk zone?
Mhm.
So
And it's exactly.
now we're arguing about more dogma around, I was taught coming through university, which I literally was, there was a strength range. If you want to get strong, it's 1 to 5, maybe. There's a hypertrophy or a muscle building phase, which is, 5 to 12. And if you want endurance, it's 12 and up. And you sort of think of it as a very linear progression around what is your goal, then it has to be in this rep range. And it's just not playing out like that as we do the research and as we actually experience this with athletes. So
Right.
I'd like to start putting some definitions around these, so people can really understand what people are talking about and what they mean.
Well, and I think the problem is, I don't think a lot of people know what they're talking about, and I don't think they know what they mean, which is a dually problematic situation in terms of, as I look at somebody like me, and again, I get called out because, all you ever do is rely on your experience. And I think probably, 40 years of doing it and because again, there was one guy in particular who kind of called all of that out. And I thought, but wait a second, I have done this. I have trained NHL players. I've trained Olympic gold medalists. I've trained, Olympic gymnasts. I've trained UFC fighters. I've literally trained every conceivable version of a human being probably that you can train.
Right.
And this guy said, I have as much experience training people as Mike Boyle. And I went back and looked him up. He was in med school in 2016. So I think, okay, you were in med school in 2016. I was in year 30 of my career. I have no idea where you managed to get 30 years of experience prior to med school that somehow made you catch up to me, and or from 2016 to now, you've been on an incredibly accelerated program of training people where you've trained them by the hundreds of thousands or something. But I'm kind of like, I don't think we're apples to apples comparison in terms of either number of people trained, or and I won't even say the quality, because I don't really think the quality matters, but the range. Because even now we have 400 adult members who train 2 days a week. We have another probably 150 people who train in a 1-to-1 setting every week. We have about the same number of athletes, 300, 400 athletes. This is all at the same time training. So we're talking about training close to 1,000 people a week, 1,000 different people in age ranges from 11 to in their 80s. It gives us a pretty good sampling of what we're looking at out in the real world.
That is research.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's every day, because I always say, for me, I've been through such a variety of environments. I went from international rugby, to NCAA, to NBA, to NHL, to Major League Soccer and now into this longevity population. And so I got to see early in my career, NCAA, 2 strength coaches, 500 athletes. You get to see everything. And it's like, as you get into the pros, it's like animal studies, right? We study mice because they only live 3 years, so we know what extends their life or not. Similar in the pros. You're in the NHL, a guy's career is 5 years long, give or take. You play on Monday, you play again Wednesday, you play again Friday, you play again Sunday. That's a pretty quick turnaround on results. So we get to know very quick with that level of exposure to elite performance, is something working. And I think that's where the experience piece can't be understated. But even in the context of evidence-based practice, people get very caught up on the research. But that's actually one of 3 parts that goes into evidence-based practice. There's research, there's experience, and there's client preference.
Right. And that's what everybody, because I put up that, which didn't get any engagement at all. I put up a post about belief. Why do we believe? And, one of the things that it said was, you've got senses, you've got experience, you've got research, like all of these things come into it. You feel it, you see it, you've done it a bunch of times. And then the research, and I said this, the research is, I don't know if I put this post up yet, but Alan Cosgrove said one time, research is sports history. And in the sense that people will look and say, like, okay, I want to do a research study. I'm going to study what this coach is doing. This coach is having a tremendous amount of success with his athletes right now doing X. Maybe it's overspeed, maybe it's resisted running, whatever it is. But someone will go and study that to try to account for the success.
Right.
If you're constantly waiting for that, like I always look at it and think, you're never going to be cutting edge. You're never going to innovate. You're never going to be the top guy if you wait around for somebody else to do it and then somebody else to study it and then for them to come back and say, yeah, that worked. And I kind of look at it and go, yeah, I know that, like single leg stuff. And I made a post about that. I need to get the guy's name. I cannot find the guy's name. I thought I had his email, but it was a young guy in the UK. This might have been 2004 or 5. Did a single leg study. I think it was actually on Rugby Guys, but he had asked me, he had said, what do you think I should study? I said, compare, take a group, riff with elevated split squat and a squat group and do some performance testing with them. And he did the testing and it came out exactly the way I thought it would come out. It was pretty much equal. So now you start looking, and again, you get into preference and risk benefit. There are other things you think, okay, if I got to choose whether I did double leg or single leg, and they both were going to have the same benefit, because that's where people for a long time said, oh, they don't have the same benefit. And I said, I think they do. Actually, I think the single leg has more benefit, actually, and I used to outline the reasons why for people. And I got into this one with another guy who this guy happened to like, but he kept saying, well, there's all these evidence that, he would say, squats do this and squats do that. And he'd show me all these studies. And I said, no. Lower body strength as measured by squats. Are attributing, are creating that adaptation. I said, they didn't test anything else. So you can't say it was squats that did it. I can say to you, I think that superior lower body strength results in superior sprint times and superior vertical jump or whatever it is. But you're telling me how you chose to measure lower body strength in this particular study. You could do isometric mid-thigh pull, you could do trap bar deadlift, you could do squat, but what you're really measuring is lower body strength. And you're giving the tool power. Right? You're giving the test power. You're saying the test is what did it. And I would look at it and say, no, the test is not what did it. The result is what did it. And so you've got to go back and look at that and say, if I got the same result that you got and I did single legs training and you did bilateral training, then you can't tell me that it was just the bilateral training that caused that. But all of the research, we haven't done enough research where we didn't look at. And I had someone the other day come back at me and say, oh, look at this study. It shows that single leg training is inferior. And I went back, I pulled up the study because I was like, get me the actual study reference. And the guy used squat in one group and step up in the other. And I was like, step up's a shitty exercise. It's not, I wouldn't, if you said to me, pick a single leg exercise, it wouldn't even be on my list.
Yeah.
Probably in the top 5. I would be like, if you couldn't do these other 5 things, maybe do step ups. So I said, that's not a fair study. And then it's same thing. The other injury study, I looked up a bunch of these injury studies because again, people were coming at me fast and furious. And I thought, I will go back and look at this because maybe I am crazy.
Right.
But one of the studies that people were quoting, it was said, 1RM testing in the elderly is safe. And they did lat pull down testing. And I thought, yeah, that's a pretty aggressive exercise that I'm sure is going to injure a lot of people. But it's one of the studies that people will point to. Oh, there's a Norwegian study that says, no one got hurt. It's 100% safe. And I went back and I looked and I said, they did lat pull downs. Another one, they did leg extensions. And it's like, this is not, you're now, again, these guys are jumping from a study on leg extensions and lat pull downs to 1RM squats and deadlifts are safe. And you're like, that's not what research says at all. And, you've got to be able to look at this way more critically. And I think that's what happens is I take the time to go back and read the studies and look and think, hey, am I missing something? And I think a lot of these people don't. They just throw the study references out there and no one bothers to hop on their computer and go and look at the study and say, okay, let's look at the methods. Let's look at what the testing was actually. Let's look at how many subjects. Let's look at who the subjects were. All that stuff matters.
Yeah, it certainly does. Because as you outline those outcome measures that they use in the study, going from very simple and constricted. So I'm seated, I'm fully supported, I have a single joint, a single muscle working in a leg extension. That there isn't a lot of exposure to risk there across various joints, right? Maybe at the knee joint, maybe.
Yeah.
But as we increase the complexity of the exercise, the increased load just exposes more weak points. It's just more to control throughout that whole kinetic chain. And so I think we have to be critical about the method of assessment here if we're going to make statements like this is 100% safe. Because I think that's a stretch. So, Mike, I would love to, let's start putting some definitions around this. For the general population who don't necessarily dig into the research like this, talk us through these rep ranges. We're talking about, people say lift heavy, and immediately people go to that 1 to 5 rep range. Mm-hmm. What exactly does that mean if we're lifting in the 1 to 5 rep range?
Well, we're lifting above 90% of our 1RM.
Which is what? So if I'm a complete layman, I'm not hearing any of this terminology. We don't have any experience.
1RM, 1 repetition maximum would be the maximum amount of weight that you could lift for 1 repetition.
Right.
If we're in between 1 and 5, we are actually 1 and 4 would be, if you went off a conventional chart, because if we're talking to the layperson, I'm talking to you, but I know you already know this, but if you look at a chart, will lay out for you the number of repetitions that a person can do at a given percentage of their 1 repetition maximum. So you can do it backwards, which is what I do. So if you say to me, I can do 100 kilos for 12, then I'm going to tell you that that's 77% of your 1 rep max. I can look at the chart and tell you what your 1 rep max is. That is less predictive the higher the rep number goes. But it is very, if you take a group of trained athletes, they will be with plus or minus 1 rep on that chart 99% of the time in my experience. It is very, very rare that somebody between 1 and 10 skews more than 2.5% high or 2.5% low. So we can very easily look at and that's why people are arguing, well, what if you do 70% of your, for 2? I'm like, that's not what we're talking about. If you do 70% for 2, you're doing your 15 RM for 2 reps. That would be very, very safe. No problem. I have no issue with that at all. The other problem, and I said is percentages are a waste of time because for most people, you have no idea what they can lift anyway. The only way you'd find out what they can lift is if I said to you, okay, grab those 50-pound dumbbells, go over on the incline bench, do as many as you can. And that's what we do a lot in terms of, we would just try to say to somebody after a break-in period, we're just going to say to somebody, hey, do somewhere between 8 and 12 and see, if they get to 12, okay, the weight was too light. We need to increase the weight. If they get 7, the weight was too heavy. And we talked about this idea of, I want them to fail or get close to failure. And I had to define this again for somebody. I used a Charles Poliquin term, technical failure. So if you're looking at me, I'm thinking the set is terminated when you can no longer do another rep the way that I wanted you to do the reps. So if you start having to increase the rate of speed or decrease the range of motion or whatever it is, okay, technical failure, you're done. And we've established at least a rough RM for you. And we have something, and what we do, we establish RMs and then we just employ progressive resistance. I tell people it's so ridiculously simple, yet these guys are, people are telling me, oh, what about Prilipin's chart? I'm like, what about it? Like, that has nothing to do with our conversation. And, and they said, what about, Wendler's 5-3-1? And I said, well, you should go back and read 5-3-1, because what you would realize, and I think Wendler is a brilliant guy and a really interesting character, very, very smart. But it's basically, if you look at 5-3-1, it's warm up, max rep, heavy set. It's kind of old school hit when you really look at what 5-3-1 is. And we do that all the time, but the 5 and the 3 are only to get you to the 1, and the 1 isn't a 1. The 1 is as many reps as you can get at that given set. 5-3-1 actually probably looks more like 5-3, 8 to 10 in the first week than it does 5-3-1. But I look at them and think, there's some of these people, I'm like, have you even read the guys? He gives it away for free on the internet, right? You can read it. It's not 5-3-1. Like, you don't even understand the fundamental underpinnings of the guy that you're quoting. So that's why, and honestly, at some point, that's why I like these sort of long form discussions are much better, because it's very, very hard when you're trying to do this via Instagram or via Twitter or whatever it is. And because there is a little bit more nuance to this and a little bit more discussion, but the simplistic part of stay between 5 and 10, again, I thought it was a simple post.
And so let's talk about why that might not have been, because I want to tease out the nuance here. And I think you've highlighted a really important point there. Science communication now is being funneled through Instagram, through 30-second clips, and it's very hard to capture nuance in 30 seconds. So there is a disconnect between expert terminology and what the exerciser hears, and also somewhat what's transmitted by people who may not have the experience to break out the nuance. So what you just highlighted is what is heavy for me. So when I hear somebody say women need to lift heavy for bone density, it's more about the effort. It's more about being close to technical failure than it is about a specific absolute weight.
Right.
And for me, that all the rep ranges do, as you alluded to, it's just the more weight you lift, the less repetitions you can actually complete with good form.
Right.
So if we take you down to a 1 repetition maximum, you lift a bigger, heavier weight. As we come away and we want you to lift and be close to failure at 12 reps, it's going to be a lighter weight. Now, what is uncontroversial here is that your risk of injury increases as the absolute weight increases.
You would say that's uncontroversial. These guys I was arguing with, that's what I mean. These guys I was arguing with on the internet were saying no, that it was just as safe. And that's why they were pulling up these studies of, but they did max testing with, and it was really interesting. That's why I said one of the studies, 2 injuries. But the 2 injuries were significant, back injury and a fractured rib. I'm like, okay, that's 2 pretty significant.
You ever had a fractured rib?
Yeah.
Like,
I have actually. I've had done it twice, and it's incredible. Like, when you roll onto your knees to get out of bed, to stand up, it's incredibly uncomfortable.
Those stats are great unless you're one of the two people that got hurt.
That's right. And that's my thing is, and or if your mom was one of the two people that got hurt, or if your kid was one of the two people that got hurt, like people, it's so easy to be cavalier when you train yourself.
I've had people get hurt in the weight room, through well-intentioned, well-planned, and something happened. It is the worst experience you can have as a professional in this field. It is devastating. And I'm talking about like 2, maybe 3 instances over 20 years. And I remember them and my palms start sweating when I start thinking about it. And I immediately start thinking like, what else could I have done?
Right, exactly. And what would I have done differently? And a lot of times that changes your programming forever. I tell people the story all the time. We used a back split squat. We would do rear foot elevated split squats with the bar in the back squat position because I felt like that's the best. Again, I was younger, dumber 20 years ago. That's the best way to get some weight on the bar and really hammer that single leg exercise. And then I had a guy, I said, when you think about what the unthinkable is, and luckily nothing happened, like he didn't get hurt, but we were doing a real heavy set, and I had a guy that failed or was in the process of failing who let go of the bar and grabbed the side rails of the squat rack with his hands and was stuck in there balancing. So he's like this, he's got 225 on his neck and it's teetering, and he's now taking his hands off. And I'm thinking, when this whole system collapses, he's going to cut all his fingers off. Like that's all I could think of was that the bar is going to come crashing down. And I remember, like you said vividly, I remember just thinking fingers. There's going to be fingers all over the floor. I'm going to be getting like plastic bags and ice and trying to pack pieces like to go to some sort of trauma center. And I'm literally hyperventilating. I'm screaming at guys to grab the bar, and I'm standing there thinking, and this kid went on to play in the NHL. He was a very, very talented player, but I'm thinking no one would be stupid enough to let go of the bar and try to balance it on their neck while they push themselves up out of the rack, right? And then I'm looking, and it's going on right in front of me. Like I have the guy who was dumb enough to have done it. We literally haven't done it since. We've used dumbbells because I was like, if someone's ditching that split squat, they're going to drop the dumbbells. Maybe worst case, they drop a dumbbell on their foot, which would still not be good, but it would not be near what I was envisioning happening in my mind. And this is 2004 or 5. It's vivid for me.
It's absolutely right. And I think so. Here's the piece then that I think gets lost when we think lifting heavy, and we immediately go to that lower end of the spectrum. We assume that there are very unique benefits that happen here, right? If I want to improve my bone density, my muscle mass, hypertrophy, I have to be here. But what the research is really showing us is if we are at that technical failure level, it really doesn't matter a lot if we're at 1 to 3 or if we're at 6 or 8. Maybe we start losing a little bit if we go above 12. But so long as we're at failure, we get benefit. You do make advancements. And so my approach has evolved to if there is risk here and there is less risk here, but the benefits are the same, we should gravitate to this lighter weight.
I always show everybody it's like a scale. If I look at risk and benefit, if I can get risk and benefit to balance, I'm very comfortable. And I feel like risk and benefit balance nicely in 5 to 10 repetitions. When I go in this way, I did a podcast with my friend Rich Alm, who's a chiropractor, the other day, and it's similar conversational vein to this. And then he sent me an article that he had written about reps in reserve and kind of why he doesn't like reps in reserve. But one of the things that he said is that the only way to know what you can do for 4 is to do 3. Right. And he said, that's the problem with all of this in terms of everything is a line. Like if I say, how do I know that's your 5 rep max? And it's like, well, I didn't complete the 6th one, right? Or I started to cheat on the 6th one. Like, it's like he said, I think he said in the article, in order to know the line, you need to cross it, which again makes me realize, I mean, that's why I don't like 4, because I don't like 3, right? And I like 5 better because I can live with 4. Like if I said to you, I want, give me 5 reps, and you turn around and you gave me 4, I would be like, that wasn't perfect, but that's okay. But if I said 4 and then you gave me 3, I'm like, ooh, because I don't understand how someone can not look at this and see like a sliding scale, like, and that's what people will say. And that's the other one. This is, was quoted back to me of, powerlifting and Olympic lifting are actually safer than team sports, which again, I look and think, okay, a non-contact sport is safer than a contact sport. I won't argue the point with you. I'll agree. But they quoted this study, and this was and I pulled this up because I'm looking at it on my phone so I can make sure I get it right. But it basically said in this study, injury incidence was low, but injury prevalence was high when defining injury as a painful condition that impairs training or competition. So they're literally like splitting the hairs in terms of injury isn't pain that keeps you from competing. Injury is like, go to the hospital, I guess. You know what I mean? Like, so you start looking and saying, what's even hurt? Injury, like they're not even comfortable. And this is another one of these studies. It's called Injuries in Weightlifting and Powerlifting, Updated Systematic Review, British Journal, December 2024. And that's the one people will cite. Oh, it shows that powerlifting and Olympic lifting are very, very safe. I'm like, until you read the kind of fine print.
Yeah, but and if you also understand why, this is where I think that we get into a very important conversation around goals. Right? If an 80-year-old comes to me and says, I want to improve my 1 rep max in the deadlift, my job is to sort of identify, okay, where are their risk factors, minimize them, explain them to the individual, and help them achieve their goal. The goal of hockey is an inherently dangerous sport. People die playing hockey because you are skating around ice on knives, right? I would always say to people, I could eliminate every single injury in sport. We would never have another injury if we stopped playing sport. That's not the goal. This was a hockey club I worked for, right? It wasn't a sports science club. The goal was hockey. We had to train them and prepare them for the demands of hockey. When we start comparing Olympic lifting and powerlifting, the goal is move as much weight as possible. That's the sport. So we're accepting that there might be some risk associated with it, and we're participating in that as a sport. That doesn't mean my grandma needs to do it.
Exactly. Well, that's like, and I go back to your initial statement. If an 80-year-old came to me and said, I want to improve my 1 arm in the deadlift, I would go so far as to say that's probably never going to happen unless you put that idea in her head. And that's the difference, I think, is that we have these coaches who put the idea in their head and then say, oh, they really want to do this. And I think, I don't know. I mean, I have yet, and again, I haven't met anybody in the world. I've never met a senior citizen who came to me with the goal of entering a powerlifting competition. Not one. Like no one has ever walked into our gym and said, I would like to participate in the World Masters powerlifting in my age bracket. It has never happened. And people say, are you not a powerlifting gym? Right? Like these guys, like they live, in the margin of find room to argue with you. But just the reality of this, when we think, I always go back to, figures lie and liars figure. Like these guys are constantly playing with the data and trying to show you, like, I have data that shows I'm right. And it's kind of like, it really doesn't show that if we look at the data. Like, let's take a good hard look at the data. And then you're going to find actually that there's a lot of holes in these kind of data sets that you can't fill in.
And it comes down to as well, like Tim Gabbett and I always talk about, like, in load management, we talk about like the marginal gains movement, right? Like if we get 1% better over time, that'll accumulate. British cycling created this marginal gains movement and then actually went away from it because they were doing so much in the margins that they forgot to do squats.
Right.
Right.
And
They
didn't
forgot
that
the
end up
ins and
getting
outs.
disproved? Didn't it end up at some point they said that there was some BS involved in that whole cycling marginal gains thing, if my
Yes,
memory serves me?
the guys were really good because they had thighs the size of most people's torsos. Right. That's why they were good at cycling, and they had like monster anaerobic capacity and strength and all these things. It wasn't because they learned how to wash their hands at the surgery center.
Right.
So this is where we can get into the margins. Are there 80-year-olds who enter powerlifting contests? Sure. I bet none of your clients are that person.
Mm-hmm.
I think, of course, there are edge cases. Of course, there are people who want to do that somewhere in the world, in some corner of a powerlifting gym. There's an 80-year-old who's always been a powerlifter who wants to do that. But I think what we're talking about is somebody who is 60 and has only ever done Pilates and yoga, and here's Mel Robbins interview someone that says, I have to lift heavy.
Mm-hmm.
That person isn't then showing up at the YMCA and saying, hey, I want to enter a powerlifting contest.
Right. Exactly. That's there.
Who we're talking to.
And that's the difference. And I think that's where like Mel Robbins that was her most viewed interview with Stacey Sims, Springfield College graduate. I happen to like Stacey Sims because I went to Springfield College also. But I do think that there is some error in the messaging. And that's what I'm just trying to get across. And my only argument is I think we should skew it 2 reps to the right. That's all. And literally that's it. That's the crux of the conversation. You're saying 4 reps. I'm saying 5 to 6. And, when we look at that and we think like in terms of, as you said, from a weight perspective, if 300 is the number and we say that 90% is 270, and I'm saying I would like you to lift 260 versus 270, I don't think that's worth throwing down on the internet about, in terms of an I'm right and you're wrong scenario.
Exactly. And I think particularly because it carries less risk and the difference in the outcome is going to be basically nothing, statistically insignificant. The 1 to 3 rep range for me, that it's a skill, right? I like lifting in the 1 to 3 rep range just because I like the challenge.
Mm-hmm.
I have liked it a lot less since I passed 40
Mm-hmm.
because I feel stuff now, right? It's easy to have this argument when you're 20.
Exactly.
But I like doing it, but no one ever is really talking about, when we say here, lift heavy, no one's ever talking about how many reps I should do or why. And it's just that absolute load that keeps increasing as we lower the reps. It's just going to expose something that's going to break, something that can't tolerate that level of load.
Right. And that's how people get, and it happens. The bottom line too is I would say anybody that's lifted knows that. I would go so far as to say that anybody that's actually lifted heavy has hurt themselves at least once, and probably way more times than that. And again, maybe not catastrophic, maybe not requiring surgery, but I think everybody, because I was a competitive powerlifter in my late early 20s. I hurt myself a lot.
Yeah.
It was like, it was back pain, it was shoulder pain, it was stuff that I could deal with. Like you said, when I was in my 20s, wasn't a big deal.
Right.
And my problem when I get into my 40s, I didn't even lift weights anymore because I didn't like it, because I liked lifting heavy weights. I didn't particularly I didn't like living in the 8 to 12 range. I didn't find it very enjoyable or very stimulating. Now I do it more out of necessity because I know I need to. I see myself and that's the other thing, the advantage that I have, everybody. I'm 66. I can tell you exactly what happens. Like people say, mean, I've kept working. I've been in the gym. I've been running. I've been jumping. My capacity has still been decreasing.
Yes.
I would say that in the last decade, my lower body power has dropped 30%.
Right.
And
Right.
I haven't done anything different. Not one thing, but it's not true. I guess I can't demonstrate jumps, so I don't jump as much anymore. So I can't demonstrate plyos like I used to. But I mean, I used at one point, I had probably a 34-inch vertical jump.
Yeah.
For 30 years, I could get on the jump mat and jump in the 20s anytime I wanted to.
Yeah.
Not like, not impressive, but now I get on the jump mat. I can't jump at 20. I can't, I get on there with some conviction and I'm posting, 16s and 18s. And it's like,
Yeah.
this is what happens. I mean, you can't, and that's the other thing I want people to understand is you can talk all the shit you want until you get old. And then you will realize that you can't fight City Hall, that it is. And people say to me, oh my God, you're a fear monger. You're encouraging frailty. I'm like, no, I'm acknowledging the process of aging. Okay. Everybody gets old and dies. It's the way that it works. But you realize that a lot of that stuff is, I want to be able to walk. I want to be able to get up off the toilet. I want to be able to pick up a grandchild. It's not somebody looking and thinking, I want to win the world powerlifting championships in the 80 to 89 range, right? You lower your bar because you start to realize, wow, the people in my age bracket can't do that. We have people who come in who they can't get off the floor.
Well, that's one of the tests that I do with my people that come in is show me, like we talk about that marginal decade. Okay, tell me what you want to achieve in your 90s. What do you want to be doing? What's your vision for your life? And I don't know that it's lowering the bar as much as it is realizing what your priorities are, like what's actually important in life.
Oh.
And it's always about connection and freedom and mobility. So I'll take that 50-year-old who tells me they're going to be heli skiing or, playing pickleball or whatever it is when they're 80 and say, okay, let's get on the ground. Show me how you get up without using your hands. And they're 50 and they can't get off the ground. And so is that person's limiting factor their maximum lift that they could possibly do? I would argue not.
Right. Exactly. But again, and I think what you end up realizing is that a lot of the people that are arguing, I think, do not regularly train people. I really believe that because I think I think anybody that regularly trained people probably would agree with you and I would look and think, yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Particularly if you're training normal people. Again, it's very different when you're working in professional sports. It's very different when you work youth. You have people who have incredible capacity and ability.
Yeah.
And then you get, like now you look at pro sports and you think, you got guys playing into their 40s,
Mm-hmm.
which was unheard of. And I wrote an article years ago about training the same athlete for 17 years. I trained this guy, Jay Pandolfo, he's now the hockey coach at Boston University, but I think he played 13 years maybe in the NHL after a 4-year career at Boston University. But it was talking about how much workouts changed over that 17-year period because, we were squat, bench press, hand clean guys in the beginning of his career. By the end of his career, none of those lifts were being done. Not one. It was dumbbell bench, one leg squat and plyos, but we were still filling the same buckets, hitting the same categories, but we had to really re-examine how we filled that bucket based on, again, mileage, which I talked about mileage and orthopedic costs and those things, and people's heads explode. But again, it's a reality, right? I mean, everything that, a lot of people love this, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Everything that you do makes, it's like, it's just not true, right? It's false. It's a false narrative. Talk to people who've been lifting their whole life, and a lot of people will say, my joints hurt, my knees hurt, my back hurt, my shoulder hurt. See people say, oh, I don't do that anymore. I don't regular bench press anymore. And, I can't deep squat anymore. I can't deadlift anymore, whatever it is. And there are the outliers who say, oh, I've been lifting my whole life and I'm fine. I think God, I wish I was you.
Great.
I'm happy
Good
for
for
you.
you.
But
But again, marginal cases.
you're not representative of
Right.
the normal population out here.
And I would even argue, Mike, that there isn't that much difference between pro sport and the general population. You know, you alluded to your career being every form of human being that you could imagine: athletic, non-athletic, youth, um, senior. For me, that what they have in common is the human body, right? It's just they're just operating on different spectrums of output. And
Yeah.
the last time I regularly trained any form of athlete in that 1 to 3 super heavy rep range, they were elite NCAA throwers. And throwing athletes need to be able to exert maximum force one time
Mhm.
as hard as they can. It is a skill, a trait that they need. At any point in my career with elite professional athletes, I didn't a single time do a 3-rep max as a part of a training plan. At
I
any
don't.
point.
Yeah, it's interesting. We will occasionally with our pros, we may go down to 3 occasionally, very occasionally. Never 2, never 1 again, but we might in a strength phase do 3 reps. But I've even gotten to the point a lot of times, lower body stuff, bilateral lower body, all we ever do is trap bar deadlift. And I almost never go
Yep.
below 5 in trap bar deadlift. Like I just don't do it. I always feel like, again, just when I venture into that margin, something goes wrong, and usually not drastically wrong, but suddenly I get a little more like, my back didn't feel good. I didn't love that. And I think, okay, did we really need that? Or, again, that's the thing where you start looking and saying, okay, where is there a real, if there was a real inherent value in those other 2 reps or taking those 2 reps away, I guess, doing 3s, doing 4s, I would probably be much more inclined to go there.
Yeah.
But I don't see it. And that's why, like, our adult population, we don't go there, period. Just that doesn't happen. Our athletic population, our young athletic population, I have no problem. I trained my son and his friends there in college. We did single rep chin-ups the other day.
Yeah.
We maxed on the back the other day. Like, they're like, I always say they're the filet mignon of the world, right? They're just, their muscular systems are as good as it's going to be.
Right.
And the harsh reality is, probably every year after 25, I always say it's filet mignon to beef jerky. You're on your way from 25 on. Like you said, you're like, maybe I'm like New York strip right now. You know what I mean? Like you're sitting there, I'm firmly in the beef jerky phase of life. You know what I mean? I'm like, crusty and dehydrated and, whereas these kids are the filet, it's perfect, and it's like, and they get a little whatever. And the next day they come in, they're like, oh, fine. If I did the same thing, weeks of that, like,
Yeah.
But again, we know that connective tissue changes. We know that muscle changes that.
Yeah.
And that's what I guess I get angry about with people, and is that when we're denying what the science is showing us, it's like, I always say to people, like, go to an old age home. This doesn't happen by accident. Somebody just doesn't suddenly wake up one day and think, oh shit, look at me. I'm 80. I'm all wrinkly and I can't move. You're like, you went along that journey, and we want to fight and I'm not gonna say it's hard. We want to fight as intelligently against the decline as we can.
Yes.
And that's the key. Fighting intelligently against the decline.
And that's where I think that the messaging is that you can improve in any of these traits at any age from where you're currently at, right? So if I show up and I'm 80 and I want to start getting stronger, and I start lifting weights in that 5, 10, 12 rep range, I'm going to get stronger. We can maximize your potential within your constraints. And I think that's a really important message in this. It's not just that it's an inevitable decline, it doesn't have to be rapid. Like we can maximize what you've got and intelligently, as you said, fight against that. Your program design is going to look very different, but we can improve bone density. We can improve muscle mass, can improve muscle strength. We have a 83-year-old woman who I train. She's in Santa Barbara. We get on Zoom twice a week, and she's doing kettlebell deadlifts, and she's at 50% of her body weight. But we don't need to keep increasing the weight. We're actually going up in reps,
right,
to keep her close to that thing,
and
right? And
that I try to explain to people too is that not declining is progressing when you get to a certain age.
exactly,
So if you can get,
exactly,
I don't know, like if I look at it and think, and because one of the things I've done is I've monitored my from a fitness standpoint, not as much from a strength standpoint, but I have bike workouts going back to early 2000s where I've written the times down, and I've been able to keep my cardiovascular fitness at a really, really high level into, I'm going on 67 now, right? I'm 66 plus. And I mean, I'm just not getting worse at the rate that I normally did. Like, I think last year was the first year I didn't set a personal best.
right,
Like we do like 2-mile,
yeah,
up bike, and I think that 2 years ago I did a 446, and like last year I did a 448, and this year I did a 451. But prior to that, I was chipping away.
yeah,
I was coming down the other way.
yeah,
But you realize that, like, if we got, again, if I got in the 66-year-old age bracket and said, we're going to do a 2-mile bike test, I'm going to beat 99% of the people in the world. I'm going to beat, but only because I haven't gotten worse, not because I've gotten better. And there is something, and again, people love, and that's what I love is people, you're defeatist. And it's like, no, this is just realism. This is what you understand. And I always think, I just wish with some of these guys that I would be able to come back when they're 66 and have the conversation, and they'd go, I see what you mean now.
yeah, I get it.
Because we even talk to people. I ask guys all the time when they talk about it, the joke is, they're like, oh, my knee hurts, my hip hurts. And I'm like, you still all original equipment? And they're like, yeah. Or some guys be like, no, 2 new knees, new hip. I got some friends that have 2 new hips and 2 new knees in my age bracket.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's crazy to me, but
I think that's the point of this. Like you have maintained a consistent high level of training throughout your life. People coming to this who don't have your level of experience will actually experience the upward swing for a significant period of time. If I look at Jill, she's been relatively consistent most of her life, but relatively new to weightlifting. She got significantly stronger for the first year that we were working together. And her capacity is continuing to increase. Her bone density increased 5%. One of the first increases she'd had in bone density. Very slight woman. So she had osteoporosis. And so all of these metrics improved, but we didn't need to be in that 1 to 5 rep range, which is where, again, just coming back to where I think most people hear heavy, that's what they think it looks like. Like every episode, we try and give people 3 takeaways. We've talked a lot about where they shouldn't be. If someone comes to you or if someone wants to start today, what would be your 3 takeaways from the conversation about what they should be doing to improve these metrics of health? How do we improve bone density, lean mass, volume of lean mass, as well as muscular strength?
Number one takeaway, and I love the book, The Slight Edge. I don't know if you've read Slight Edge, but show up. That's the number one thing, because there is no substitute for showing up. If you can say to yourself, and again, this is where we look at it and think, we say that, the best program, the sets and reps is 2 times 52. Come 2 times a week, 52 weeks a year. Don't miss any days. Don't miss any weeks. And the next thing I'd say is that try to get from 2 to 3. Because again, if you look at our client base, the majority, I'd say 80% come 2 days a week. 80% of the people that we see are coming, trying to just get 2 total body workouts in 2 times a week. If you can extend that out to 1 more and get to 3, you're doing a lot. The other thing I would say, like when you're talking about bone density, muscle mass, I think you need to up the stress of your cardiovascular work. It was funny that you say this, but I was watching one of our clients she's probably about my age. She's definitely in her 60s. And she was, we have our My Zones up on the big screen TVs in the gym. And she was up in the 150s. And one of the things that I've realized, and again, probably you have too, is that 220 minus your age is not at all reflective of fit older people. Not even like I routinely get in the 160s. And I've been as high as 184 in the last 2 years. I'm 60 plus years old. So Andy Galpin said on a podcast, I heard him say one time, you really should rev the engine once a week, at least. And so I think that would be the one thing is say to people like, and again, this is like the lift heavy shit thing. This is after an acclimation period. Like to me, it's always assault bike. Because I want to be non-weight bearing if I'm talking about cardiovascular work with people. I want to get them in a non-weight bearing situation. I love the assault bike because the arms and legs are working. I love the assault bike because we can be extremely quantitative about what's going on in terms of how fast you can ride a mile, how fast you can ride 2 miles. But once you've gotten comfortable in that environment, then I think you should be doing some aggressive interval training at least once a week and ideally twice a week. So I think if you looked at, takeaways, right? It's just show up, try to move yourself from 2 days a week to 3 days a week. And on at least one of those days, rev the engine a little bit where you think, okay, I did that. I got out of breath, that I got uncomfortable. I think that would be really good takeaways for really anybody, but particularly if we're talking about that, that 40 to 70-year-old person. And again, we can go back and say, within obviously you want to make sure that you've had your cardiac workup and that you're fit to exercise, blah, blah, blah. Like, all the disclaimers, I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV. It's like, you got to put all that backfill stuff in there. But I just think, and this is it's incredibly simple. If you look at what people are not doing, they are not showing up in droves. Right? They're just not. And this is why people are arguing about exercise, we're hitting this tiny segment of the population. We're hitting statistically about 5% of the people probably exercise properly, maybe less than 5%. So the one good thing, our market's massive. That's why I say to people, that's the thing to be optimistic about, is that the market is freaking massive.
Yeah.
And you just got to be able to look at that and say, okay, if I can get these people to come in, and for us, and then I'll go, one more thing is, everybody should foam roll. Everybody should stretch. Everybody should warm up. I think, we talk about the first 15 minutes of the workout being the most important 15 because it's the part nobody does.
Yeah, exactly.
And so getting somebody in there and saying, hey, do your prep work, do your tissue prep work, do your mobility work, get all that stuff done. I mean, honestly, I think you can lift 15 minutes twice a week and get enough done to create a lot of positive change. But I think we spend, we kind of major in the minors. Sometimes we spend too much time doing shit that doesn't matter and not enough time doing things that are going to really move the needle. And strength work will move the needle. Heavy sets of 5 to 10 reps. And a cardiovascular workout where the intervals are fairly short and it leaves you out of breath and gets your heart rate a little bit is going to be really beneficial.
I think you've touched on something really important with that last statement, that most people aren't even going to the gym, right? And we're over here arguing, should we do 4 or 6 reps?
Exactly.
Right? I had one of the coaches from Precision Nutrition on an episode, and he was basically saying through all of their data, There are millions of data points of people coming through their lean eating program. If people are at approximately 50% compliant and they do that over an extended period of time, they get meaningful results.
Yeah.
So your point of just showing up and being consistent in essentially any sort of movement, but we would emphasize strength and cardiovascular work, but show up and move and you're going to get some benefit.
Absolutely. And particularly, and just don't, because I do think, we talk about lowering the bar. I think sometimes when people say gardening is exercise and walking, no, I'm not like, that's the other thing. I think that's where we're lowering the bar. Like, we're not talking about, like, I'm not saying get out and take a walk.
Yeah.
I'm saying you get to a gym twice a week where there's somebody who knows what they're talking about, who will help you to lift weights. And our big slogan, like I always say, safe and smart. That's what I want. I want safe and smart. I want a safe workout. I want an intelligently designed workout. If you can find somebody that's both safe and smart to train with, then you're in, again, that person's not going to argue with us about, they're not going to spend a lot of time arguing methods or rep ranges, right? They're not.
It's not. Yeah, it's true. Like, where can people find you, learn more from you, potentially even come and work with you?
So the number one place, strengthcoach.com, we still maintain a website with a forum, which is really old school, but it's $14.95 a month. I mean, and people can get on and ask any question that they want any time of the day or night, and they generally get an answer within 24 hours. Usually from me, but oftentimes from other smart people. So I think that's a really easy place for people to go without spending a lot of money. I think now you can go to Amazon and I'm working on the third edition of functional training for sports, and I'm going to do another edition of advances in functional training for human kinetics. So, the books are out there. Athletes Acceleration has a lot of this stuff on DVD. If somebody, we have online stuff, you can go on our Body by Boyle website. You can click on online training. If somebody's listening to this who's in the Boston area, they can find us. We're in Woburn, Massachusetts and Middleton, Massachusetts, which means nothing to you, but might mean something to somebody from Massachusetts.
Yes, it might. Well, I hope it does. We actually, the majority of my clients are actually in Boston.
Really?
And we have a good group up there. So I'm becoming more familiar with it.
It's a great area, honestly. I'm a born and raised, so
amazing. Well, everybody who was born and raised in Boston seems to absolutely love it.
It's true. They're not in a big hurry to leave.
Oh, definitely not. Well, Mike, again, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a real pleasure having you on. I've loved chatting with you, and there's so much amazing stuff for people to take away.
Well, great. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. It's a lot of fun. Like I said, it's amazing. We've been on here for an hour and 15 minutes, and it seems like it's been 15 minutes.
Yeah, it really does. Thank you, mate.
All right.
It was so great to have a conversation today with somebody that I've learned so much from over the years and has had such a big influence on my career. Here are the 3 key things you can take away from today's episode. Number 1, show up consistently, even if it's twice a week. If you can increase from 2 days to 3 days of training in the gym, you're already ahead of 95% of the population who aren't training at all. Number 2, lift in the 5 to 10 rep range for strength work. This range, which is roughly 77 to 87% of your 1 repetition maximum, gives you the best balance of safety and effectiveness, building real strength without the elevated risk that comes with max lifting. Number 3, rev the engine at least once a week with cardiovascular intervals. Get into a non-weight-bearing activity like the assault bike and do short, aggressive intervals that leave you out of breath and get your heart rate up. Just be sure to do this after an acclimation period. If this episode resonated with you, the best way to support the show is to follow us wherever you listen to your podcasts, leave a rating or a review, and share this with somebody that you think could benefit from this message. It makes a real difference in helping us reach more people who could benefit from these conversations. You can stay connected with us on Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube
at Vitality Collective Performance, where we share additional insights, behind-the-scenes content, and updates on upcoming episodes. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time.